Brewing Conversation, live from Nicaragua. Dive deep into the world of coffee with co-founders of Twin Engine Coffee, Andrea Wolverton and Colin Ganley.
Welcome to Brewing Conversation, Season 0, Episode 4. My name is Andrea Wolverton.
And I'm Colin Ganley. And today we're going to talk about moving to Nicaragua. Neither one of us is from here. We're both from the United States. And if you heard the previous episode, you know that we lived before here in Italy. And in order to start Twin Engine, we decided that we wanted to live where the coffee grows. But where to choose? How did we come to this idea of living in Nicaragua, and more specifically in León?
And I think that question is probably, hello, my name is Andrea, I live in Nicaragua. Why do you live in Nicaragua? Is probably one of the most common questions that I get by Nicaraguans, by outside of Nicaraguans. People find it quite interesting. So we have to go back to Italy and what we were thinking when we were deciding to make this big move. It was always to Nicaragua. I mean, there was never any other country in question. It was, so you had so much experience with your work in premium cigars here, and it was looking like a pretty good opportunity.
Yeah, we had traveled here a few times. I mean, I was coming here
once. I traveled here once on do you remember my 30th birthday? How we went to San Juan. That was actually my only time. So it was a pretty big leap of faith on my part, trusting you.
But then you also went when you were halfway through your time at the United Nations, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, once we had decided, but I mean, I guess you don't really decide until you actually have your feet in a house here. We had been talking about moving here. And so, through FAO, I was here for a month studying coffee and agribusiness from the farms all the way to the supermarkets, what's in the supermarkets, what is missing, et cetera. And at that time, the whole freezer section was just full of frozen potatoes.
Here in Nicaragua.
Here in Nicaragua, at all at the main supermarkets. So there's been a pretty big departure from that.
Yeah, well, because you love fresh food and you know that it can be not that expensive to eat fresh, and so you don't have to eat the frozen. That's your thesis, right?
Right, exactly. So we were looking for a place that we felt like it had a lot of boxes checked. So you could live in near the weather, is very safe, statistically close to if we wanted to travel back to the U.S. But the bigger issue is that has recovering from the 80s in coffee production.
Yeah, I think for me that there are two parts of how I thought about it. So I thought about moving here in two ways. One was for our personal lives, and the other one was for the business. And so for our personal lives, I thought, well, particularly in the city of León, it's a university town. So you've got students, cafes, restaurants, and then you also have the Pacific Ocean, which is about a 15-minute drive away. Right. So you could actually live on the Pacific beach.
With the new road.
Yeah, if you wanted to. And you'd only be 15 minutes away from the restaurants and the supermarkets and things of town. And so that was pretty appealing. Because of all the universities, it's more of a cultural city. And we're only 2 hours from an international airport, which at that time had something like 5 flights a day back and forth to the United States. Obviously, from the United States, you can get anywhere. So it basically had all the fundamental things. Yeah, it would be a change of lifestyle for sure.
Right. But I mean, I think I'm sitting here across from you smiling because now we're going to have lived here for 6 years in about a month. And so it's really hard for me to separate this question of why we chose Nicaragua and what has been the reality. But I'm gonna try to stay focused in the why and as opposed to the real experience. So from a coffee business perspective, we knew Esteli. We had a lot of...
which is a city in the north, not far from the coffee production.
And so in general, in coffee, so Nicaragua had a pretty big dip in coffee production. Coffee came here the 1800s, and so in the 80s, the coffee production dipped, but then it's been this in the 2000s, a very up and coming green coffee production, 100% Arabica, altitudes pushing a mile high, so a lot of potential, and the coffee grows right near the Great Cacao, so it was looking like there's quite a potential to work in coffee when we were thinking about it.
And I thought that, so there's a book that I really like. It's the unauthorized, or what is it? What's it called? It's is it the unauthorized? No, it's not. Unauthorized autobiography of Baron Philippe de Rothschild, or something, something contrarian like that in the title, where he kind of wrote it, but I think he sort of dictated it to a writer, and then they wrote it down and made it readable. But in that book, he's the person who revived the wine company Chateau Mouton. You may have heard of Chateau Mouton Rothschild, etc. That's him in its modern incarnation. And one of the things that he did that I thought was really brilliant for a luxury product was that he focused on quality and communicating to the customer about quality. And the way that he chose to do that was something that I certainly took notes on, and I thought we could apply in coffee, which was to bottle the wine at the chateau. In the past, the wine had been bottled at basically a big wine bottling warehouse in the city. And he said, let's bottle the wine here at the chateau, and that way we can tell all of our customers that they know 100% that the wine they're getting in a bottle with our label is from our vines. It's the wine that we made. There's no chance that somebody in the warehouse was doing something sneaky.
And that was what was interesting when I came during my FAO trip. As a researcher, I found that despite the up and coming coffee culture in the coffee consuming countries, in the production, it was still quite, there just wasn't much here in terms of specialty coffees. So everything was still being exported green. There was some opportunity there to be able, so there's a free coffee market here. So that means that it's possible for a small company to start working in coffee. It's not controlled like in many African countries. The sales are controlled by the government, but there was just quite a bit of opportunity because there was just no specialty coffee available, and no one was crafting at the estate where the coffee grows, etc.
Yeah, so that was we saw an opportunity there because so many coffees, when they get to the final consumer, have been adulterated, or people don't really know where they came from, or they've heard a story, but you're relying on several people telling the truth along the chain of supply in order to verify and ensure and safeguard that is in fact the case. So we thought, okay, if we move to Nicaragua and we find the very best coffees each year and put them out under our label, the coffee can literally go from the farm to the sun-drying patio to our roastery, and then we export it, and it would never leave our control.
Which is unheard of in the coffee world. It would be the opposite. This idea of what is local coffee. No one is talking about, local coffee is actually where it grows, as opposed to a local winery. I mean, you would definitely expect that in a local winery, the wine is from that winery, as opposed to what the dynamics are in the coffee world otherwise.
And so that and other opportunities like that, we imagined would come to us if we moved here. So we thought that just being here and being able to exert that kind of control, literally the type of control where you take your pickup truck, go to the place, grab exactly what you need, and then it's yours and you hold on to it, is a level of control and would allow us to be creative and flexible and to know what we have and communicate that to our customers in a way that we didn't feel like we could have if we were, say, in the United States buying from brokers. Right. And so that was one of the big appeals on the business side for locating ourselves here, for living in Nicaragua.
Of course, the second most common question by everyone is, why León? Especially when you...
Right.
So León was the original capital, and then there was a dispute between Granada, but it's a colonial city with a beautiful cathedral, beautiful colonial buildings, but it's not the capital. The capital is Managua, and like most developing countries, the capital is where most of the commerce is. But we moved here with the concept of not only having the control for our product in the world, but to help further the coffee culture in Nicaragua. And so that meant going to a place that had youth and energy, but virtually no coffee culture, because we're 2 hours from where the coffee mountains are.
Yeah.
We're roasting 2 hours from where the coffee
Yeah, we roast 2 hours from where the coffee is grown. And for us, 2 hours doesn't seem like a big deal. I mean, we're both from the Midwest. Some people will spend 2 hours commuting back and forth.
Right. I mean, we hop in a car, and I grew up 80 miles from the nearest shopping mall. So going up to Cape Girardeau was not a big deal. That's what you just did.
Yeah. So for us, we didn't think that was such a big deal. But but it was funny. We discovered that a lot of our employees, when we first started hiring people, had never seen a coffee bean that had
almost no one in Leon that I've met has ever even seen a coffee plant.
Yeah.
Much less a raw coffee seed, green coffee, aka, and because 2 hours, I think the big thing we didn't realize is that 2 hours when you don't know how to drive, and there's no way you're going to have access to a vehicle, which is the majority of the population. It's a long ways because it's not 2 hours. It's then 5 hours because you're in a few different buses and you don't feel comfortable. And so all of a sudden this, what we consider just to be a hop and a skip, turns into be a cultural shift between people. And then vice versa, many of our friends in the North have never been to the beach.
Yeah.
They've never been to Leon, which is, it's just hard to imagine from someone from a larger country. So we based ourselves in Leon, Nicaragua. We based our roastery in Leon, Nicaragua, and it's been quite an interesting path since then.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I think we were right about a lot of the things. There have definitely been some amusing things that we were wrong about.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, it has, living here has given us a huge amount of creativity and flexibility in crafting coffees. And, we hear about micro lots of coffee that no one would ever hear about.
Right. We're able to do that in a small volume at a very reasonable price, because it's just between us and the farmers. And
an example would be a farmer called us a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, I was experimenting. I planted these plants, but I only planted it on like 1 manzana of land, so I only have a couple 100 pounds of this coffee. Now, we know this farmer to be one of the best in the country." And he said, it's this seed from that's experimental, and I think it tastes pretty good. Would you guys have any interest? Now, 200 pounds is not going to be interesting to hardly anybody. But because we're located here and we have our own roasting capability and we can do a custom little package, we can do a tiny little release out to, whether it's Amazon or one of our retailers or anywhere, really. And so those kinds of things are part of the fun of being here, is we can, if somebody has a 200-pound lot, we can taste it and see if we like it. And if we like it, try to see if it makes sense in some way to make it available to people. And
it was that was virtually unheard of to be available in Nicaragua. So that's the cool thing about being here, is that the same coffee that is on Amazon is the same coffee that is available to our customers here in Nicaragua as well. And I mean, that sounds counterintuitive, and we can talk about that later, but it's a huge issue here. And so it's really neat that we can offer these micro lots to everyone, and as well as on larger formats in the U.S.
So if the coffee's grown 2 hours away from here, why are we living here?
Well, the coffee's grown in, let's see, so what would you compare it to? I mean, it'd be like, not saying like New York versus my hometown, but the idea is that where the coffee is grown, it's just grown there, and then almost virtually all of it's exported. There's not much of a market there, but the reality is, it's like there's a grocery store Right. It's the quality of life. So we needed to be located somewhere where we could live, have relatively decent access to, our standard of living, which is really just having a couple decent grocery stores, the market, some culture. We have a theater in Leon, different schools. There's a lot of music here. Being able to access the airport. We need to be able to access the airport and also having clients here in Nicaragua, because that's part of our mission as well.
Yeah.
And in the north, it's just production.
Yeah, because we need to balance that all out, because we have to do the marketing stuff, we have to do sales and talk to customers and be in touch with the people, not just growing coffee.
Right. I mean, like you think about like people don't move to Nebraska to launch, or like Moline, Illinois, different places where you do heavy production.
To make a bread company.
Yeah, right. I mean, they do now because there's, artisan everything, which is great. But in general, it's a little bit difficult sometimes in the small towns of 200 people to launch.
Well, we wanted to have a decent grocery store. We wanted to have some recreational activities. We weren't doing this to punish ourselves. We're doing this because it was a passion project, and for us, 2 hours isn't a big deal. But sometimes people ask us that. They'll say, "Well, why aren't you located up in the mountains?" And but for us, it's pretty straightforward. It's the personal side of the business, and the fact that we need to be able to communicate with people and interact with people.
Except no one in the mountains is asking us that question. It's mostly people who live in Managua.
Yeah, of course.
No one in Leon nor in the mountains ever asks us that. It's almost always people from outside or from the capital or the south, which is kind of an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. So why did we base our company here? Have we answered that?
I believe so. So here is Nicaragua to many listeners, but for us here is specifically in Leon, and we also happen to be on the road to the Pacific Ocean. So we're on the ocean side of Leon, much more specific. And why is that? Because we wanted to be a little bit out of town in the country to have some nature, and also want to be able to go to the beach pretty regularly, right? So we can go right outside and be at the beach in 15 minutes. Some pretty big crashing waves to get us back. Life here is not, it's interesting, it's intense, it has a lot of pros and cons, and so a lot of times you just need to walk on the beach to normalize everything. There's nothing like the crashing of the waves to wash away some things.
Yeah, so for better or for worse, whether we were right or wrong, that was our thinking going into it. And thank you for listening. We appreciate you, and join us for our next episode.
This has been Brewing Conversation with Andrea Wolverton and Colin Ganley. Thank you for listening. For more connection to coffee and Twin Engine Coffee, go to twinenginecoffee.com or email us. We'd love to hear from you.